From the News Channel 5 network, this is a special presentation.
It's the devil. It's horrible.
Opiates took me to other places, you know.
It's just like cocaine without the come down.
Users are almost running to the fire as opposed to running away from the fire.
I've done things I'm not proud of.
To be brutally honest, I sold my kids things to get it.
So in 7th grade, he started on the opiates.
We're having mass casualty events in this country every day as it relates to the opioid crisis.
The damage I've done, I don't know if I could ever really just fix it.
If you are a drug user, you need to stop and get help.
I'm ready. Nervous, but I'm ready.
Don't give up.
It's not just a problem, it's a crisis.
Opioid abuse continues its strong grip on communities, destroying families across Tennessee.
If you think you know who it affects, think again. It can be your teacher, police officer, or even your pastor.
More people died of overdoses in the state last year than ever before, and nearly 1,300 of the overdoses in 2017 were linked to opioids.
It's now a topic for candidates running for office, but despite political feuds, there's still the never-ending battle to stop it. Here's Matthew Torres.
But you're so absorbed in the pain that the other person is going through that your entire day is just done for.
It knows no gender,
Like when you are in recovery, your family's in recovery.
no race,
But healing is possible in time.
and no socioeconomic status.
Caring, concern, and love.
In the walls of this room,
You do look a bit frustrated, and I can definitely see how the situation can cause you to think the way you think.
there's no such thing as boundaries.
I was a dead woman walking.
Addiction judges no one.
I was a functioning addict, very well. I ran a business. I was a successful businesswoman, sales manager. As my addiction got worse, my business went under within 2 years.
Andrea Kirshner is at the intersection of her life where desperation and hope meet.
Will I get my family back? I hope. But I have to show them I am serious this time. And I am, because I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired.
The past 4 years of opioid abuse have driven her to a wall.
To be brutally honest, I sold my kids things to get it. I stole from my family for money to get it. You will do next to anything.
Smashing what she's always known into pieces. Overdosing was her wake-up call.
My daughter watched. And my friend told her not to call 911. And how I woke up was grace of God. And I'm sitting here, my 10-year-old daughter's looking me in my eye.
It was pills that caused her life to take a turn for the worse.
Percocet, Vicodin, that got too expensive. I was introduced to heroin. I loved it.
Started going to my doctor and telling him I was in pain. And I recall he prescribed me Percocet and other oxycodones.
For Althea Miles, Percocet prescribed after a surgery led her down a dangerous path. Her problem grew for nearly a decade, even though she knew there was an issue.
I can recall going back to him, telling him that I had a problem, and I'm thinking I'm having a problem, and he was like, no, you know, and he proceeded to give me extra scripts.
Pinpointing the exact cause of the problem can spark debate. Many would say it was because of overprescribing painkillers. Nowadays, others would argue not so much. In reality, the number of prescriptions across the country has dramatically gone down in recent years than how it was before.
Things absolutely snowballed.
Cumberland Heights Chief Medical Officer Dr. Chapman Sledge says it began when standards changed in the late 90s and early 2000s. Pain was considered a fifth vital sign. Advocates pushed for doctors to use opioids such as OxyContin, while pharmaceutical companies claimed the drugs were less addictive and less harmful.
In the early 80s, mid 80s, you would never dream of using opioids to treat chronic non-malignant pain. And the medical profession was sold a bill of goods that, we've got this epidemic of undertreated pain, and prescriptions skyrocketed after 2001.
By 2015, the Centers for Disease Control reported there were enough opioids to treat every American around the clock for 3 weeks. Earlier this year, Tennessee filed a lawsuit against Purdue Pharma, the manufacturer of OxyContin, for fueling the opioid crisis. It accuses the company of valuing profit over people with knowledge of the drug's addictive risks. Since then, the state's largest insurance provider, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, announced it will no longer cover OxyContin, but instead provide medication that's harder to abuse.
We've known that opioids have some addictive potential. I don't think anybody realized how badly it would get out of hand.
Doctors like Nashville plastic surgeon Mary Jane Graff says medical professionals are aware of their role in the crisis.
We all feel some responsibility for the opioid crisis, and we're all trying very hard to do everything we can to decrease the amount of opioids that we are prescribing.
Cutting back on prescriptions is one piece of the state's extensive mission to combat the crisis. Tennessee Together is a $30 million plan focused on prevention, law enforcement, and treatment. As of July, doctors can only prescribe opiates for up to 3 days. But depending on the patient's condition, they can also prescribe for up to 10 or 20 days. But that means requiring more documentation and more evaluation. With restrictions in place, doctors are also instructed to give alternative treatment options. Hospice care or major physical trauma patients are among those exempt.
The laws that have come down from the state have actually helped solidify a lot of the work that we've done already.
For hospitals like St. Thomas Midtown, doctors have already been offering drug combinations that do not require opiates. There is a national database to determine if a patient is doctor shopping by looking up the number of opiate prescriptions by how many different providers. But it keeps doctors accountable too.
Oftentimes, if you can just talk to them and say, it appears that you're prescribing opiates more frequently than your peers, they can self-modify most of the time.
I played a part, I have to accept that. I played a part, at one point I did know better, but, if somebody keeps giving you something and you go to them for advice, you kind of think in your mind it may be okay. And then I did have true pain, so.
Opioids may have consumed them, but now they're turning their lives around.
But I do understand absolutely where you're coming from.
Addiction knows no boundaries, but recovery sees no limits.
I'm not rushing home to anybody. There's nobody to rush home to. There's nobody that I'm trying to do this for. I'm doing it for me. Finally, I'm doing it for me.
Coming up next.
The call came in as a syncope, which means the patient passed out and they don't know why.
When Hooked, Tennessee's opioid crisis returns.
The reason why opioid deaths are still on the rise is because of fentanyl, a powerful opioid more potent and cheaper than heroin. There's been a dramatic 70% spike in deaths related to fentanyl since 2016.
And with drug cartels in the picture, fentanyl isn't only dangerous to addicts, but the men and women who try to save them. Here's more now with Matthew Torres.
21, I'm going to respond on that, Trinity. Can you give me the numerical?
It's 9:30 on a Wednesday night. An overdose call came out at a group home in Murfreesboro. In a matter of minutes, the patient is in the back of the ambulance. It's unclear exactly what drugs were used, but he's alive.
The call came in as a syncope, which means the patient passed out and they don't know why.
It's like any other night for Brandon Smith.
You do still get the adrenaline rush that you usually do when you started the job.
Paramedic 6, Stewart Valley Drive.
Rushing to scenes no matter how little or big the situation is.
So we won't know much more until we get there and we're actually able to talk to the family and see what's going on.
Hearing the details of this call could mean an overdose and could be another death.
So I'm thinking about what my treatment modality is going to be for the patient to try to figure out why that individual passed out.
It turned out to be cardiac issues unrelated to drugs.
Let's go ahead and get the stretcher set up.
For Smith, though, it's only a matter of time before he has to revive someone from an overdose.
Sometimes you'll get several overdoses in a shift, and then a couple of shifts go by, weeks go by, and you won't get one. But they do come in waves.
For about a year, the Rutherford County EMS has been using what's called power units. Crews and ambulances roaming and ready when an overdose call goes out.
They're right there, they're ready to go, they're in their trucks, and time does matter.
How bad the problem can be determined by how many times Narcan,
This is Narcan, and this is the atomizer.
the brand name of naloxone, is used.
Narcan is an opioid antagonist. We use it to reverse the effects of opioids. The Narcan, it won't bring someone back from the dead.
Rutherford County crews administered Narcan 123 times in 2013. Fast forward to last year, it spiked to 415. Anyone is able to buy and learn how to use the life-saving drug and is even a part of take-home overdose kits.
You put this up their nostril and you push, but you have to push fast enough for it to atomize out of this little foam atomizer.
But as the need for Narcan grows, so does the price. In 7 years, the cost nearly tripled. It's the price to pay as stronger and counterfeit drugs hit the streets.
Then screw this together here.
Nowadays, one dose isn't enough to keep someone from dying.
There have been incidents where just a grain of salt or a grain of sugar, that much fentanyl, has caused emergency personnel, either be it law enforcement or medical, to go horizontal.
Fentanyl is what's driving the opioid crisis rampant.
You know, you have an active shooter tomorrow somewhere across this country, it gets a lot of focus and a lot of attention. I'm telling you, we're having mass casualty events in this country every day as it relates to the opioid crisis and overdoses.
TJ Jordan, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, says majority of the fentanyl initially came from China until its government began tightening its belt last year. It became prime opportunity for Mexican drug cartels to infiltrate U.S. communities. Pill press machines in home labs are being used to mix fentanyl into other drugs like heroin or cocaine, and users may not realize it. So buying the drugs off the streets could be a death sentence.
What happens is you might get one pill right out of the gates that has no fentanyl in it, and then the next one may have some sprinkle, and then the next may have some spattering, and then the next may be just a mostly high content of fentanyl.
In 2014, the TBI lab tested 34 positive samples of fentanyl or similar drugs found from scenes. So far this year, the number skyrocketed to 841.
Almost running to the fire as opposed to running away from the fire.
But now the TBI is dealing with people wanting something stronger despite countless warnings as addicts use the drugs in group settings.
Drug addicts are using together with their colleagues in an attempt to, if they crash, that there's somebody there to revive them.
And with recent opioid laws, there are concerns the use of fentanyl or heroin will increase, especially from the pain community.
And there's got to be people worse out there than me. It's still kind of new.
Pain patients like Chantal Burke, who rely and function on opioids, say recent regulations may force others to seek drugs on the streets that are easier and cheaper to get. The Tennessee Pain Society says doctors have opted out of treating patients or prescribing opioids in general because of stricter rules, also out of fear of legal consequences. As a result, existing pain clinics have been swarmed.
Some of the practices, I understand, are actually no longer accepting any more patients. They've just been saturated.
In 2015, there were more than 350 pain management providers in Tennessee. The number has now dwindled to less than half.
It does leave people in the dark with the clinics closing. It's a very sad thing. Very dangerous thing to happen.
Over the summer, Comprehensive Pain Specialists abruptly closed its clinics in the state, leaving thousands of chronic pain patients fearful and scrambling to find another provider who'd accept their insurance.
Right now, I guess I better start weaning myself off of my opioids and hope there's no seizures.
I've tried calling places. One place had 3 months booked and they had a few hundred people waiting to get in.
Patients say access to opioids is vital, but find themselves caught in the middle of a never-ending battle.
Because there will be people who consider killing themselves because the pain gets so bad.
Coming up next.
We want to put a face to it because this just isn't a numbers game.
And later.
This is me the week before I went to treatment at Buffalo Valley.
When Hooked, Tennessee's opioid crisis returns.
Imagine realizing your son was found dead in a bathroom, or having to take care of your own grandchildren because their parents are too addicted.
It is a reality of the nationwide plague robbing families of their trust, love, and security. Here's Chris Conti.
This crisis does not discriminate when it comes to who it's taking from us. By some estimates, 115 people are dying every day from opioid overdoses. It's creating broken homes, broken families, and broken hearts.
This drug is a very commanding drug that overtakes people's lives.
It is the ones who are left behind who are left to wonder.
Yeah, I wish my son was alive.
Left to wonder what could have been.
We want him to be telling his story.
Eric Blom was in 7th grade, barely a teenager when he had his first Xanax. His parents, Dan and Cindy, watched over the years as opioids' often inescapable grip took hold of their son and refused to let go.
He was just hopeless, and he always said that he really didn't think he was going to make it till he was 30.
It was an expensive addiction, too expensive to get the pills. Like so many others in this country, Eric soon turned to heroin.
He tells us he recalls that's being the best peace he's ever felt. And he said, and I've chased that every day since. Never found it again.
Imagine what these parents must have seen in their son to accepted what they saw as Eric's fate.
I remember vividly the night that Cindy told me, she goes, Dan, do you realize that we may bury Eric someday? And I'm like, yeah, I know.
The details of Eric's death, we will leave to them.
2:22 Thursday morning, we got the call no one wants. He was desperate that night, and he decided he was just going to use heroin one more time. He'd been clean for 6 months, and it killed him.
That was it. Eric was gone.
And he's not here. He didn't make it. I was hoping he'd get healed this side of heaven, but he didn't.
Theirs is a story repeated too many times, too many different ways.
Every 3 weeks, as many people die of overdose as they did in 9/11. Yeah, it's a health crisis.
Wasn't your dad 36? Yeah, he was 36.
No need to tell that to Cheryl Cox.
It's killing them every day. Every day somebody dying of an overdose. Every day.
Cheryl lives in the Nations, crammed in a tiny apartment with 6 grandkids.
We survive. I mean, we makes it. We take it day by day.
4 years ago, she was forced to take them all in after her daughter and son-in-law were arrested for selling opioids. Sandrell is 11 years old.
It's just really hard because they're our parents, and most people expect for kids to live with their parents.
By some estimates, more than 1 million American children are living with their grandparents right now, primarily because of their parents' addiction to opioids.
It creates a mess for everyone.
Sandrell still gets to see her mom sometimes. Seeing her dad, though, means coming here.
He had took some drugs, and I think there were poison in them, And he was in a hospital for like a couple of weeks, and they had to let him go.
Mandrell Newsom was 36 years old. He too turned to heroin back in August.
I guess it's all this organs start shutting down on him.
And he too is now gone.
Yep.
Another broken family, another child left behind.
It's very sad, lonely.
This is what the opioid crisis is doing to our community.
He took care of his kids, he took care of his wife.
Cheryl wants just one person, one family to hear her story and reach out for help.
That hurts, and just to know what they have to deal with, living without a father in their life.
As for Eric Blom's parents, they have now started making and selling guitars named after their son.
And some of the profits from those guitars will go towards helping families like ours.
Because with so many people getting hooked, hope may be one of the most powerful cures.
And they hope that and pray that something that can be done about it.
Coming up.
I look forward to living, and I want to give my kids a father that they deserve.
When Hooked continues.
Law enforcement officials say you can't arrest your way out of the opioid crisis. At the end of the day, it's all about finding help. Part of the state's plan focuses $25 million on recovery and treatment services. After all, there is hope.
Outside Turning Point.
Like, what was one trigger for you?
in the woods.
How much damage was done in your relationship with your family?
A life fallen on hard times.
Deep down, I've hurt them, but I've hurt myself. Myself hurting them in the long run.
Does make a sound.
Address the source, because what has been happening for so long is you mask it and you just don't address issues.
A counselor and friend not only hear Chris Garrett.
I'm at 38 funerals in 2 years.
That's too many.
But they're listening.
For like 2-3 days there, it was just a fear of reality that just sunk in.
For the first time in a long time, he believes what he's saying out loud.
I'm ready. Nervous, but I'm ready. I'm ready for that next step.
Like many of his friends, heroin took a hold of his life and forced him out on the streets.
It's the devil. It's horrible. It's screw everybody else. I'm doing what I gotta do to get to what I need. I don't care about your feelings. I don't care who you are. If I gotta get you, I gotta get you.
But for the first time in a long time, he's getting back on his feet.
I look forward to living, and I want to give my kids a father that they deserve.
He hopes to one day give back and work at the same center that's helping him now. Much like Cheryl Kuhn.
I was like I was a zombie. I had no idea what was going on.
Her near-death experience overdosing on fentanyl 4 years ago.
I know it sounds kind of surreal, but you know, people say when they die, they see a bright light. That's real.
Had her soul screaming for help.
I remember praying for God to please let me wake up and I wouldn't do this again. My kids could not find me like this.
Luckily, the people at Buffalo Valley listened and helped. The center helps treat opioid withdrawal symptoms with another opioid, Suboxone. After a successful recovery, she is now an employee there.
This is me the week before I went to treatment at Buffalo Valley. And I look at that picture and I see nothing. I see a sad, scared, hopeless woman.
To help others in their journey, Kuhn was certified to become one of 11 so-called recovery navigators in the state. The job is simple. Help navigate someone's life after an overdose.
Once they're able to consent, the doctor will tell them, you know, hey, would you like to speak to someone? Are you wanting help? Are you looking for help? At that point, they call one of us and we respond.
The program just started in Nashville. She'll get to provide services, support, and share her story of overcoming addiction in hopes of breaking down the stigma.
I can't wait to walk into that hospital, into that emergency room and look at that person and say, hey, I've been there. I've lived it, I've ate it, I've breathed it, and look at me now.
You can come out here and the smells are different. It's just complete peace and serenity out here in the woods.
Garrett is getting ready to transition to an outpatient therapy. It's one of many steps to beating opioid addiction. He's learning getting out of the woods is not impossible. When asking for help, it isn't left unheard.
I just want to live a life, a sober life.
If you or someone you know is battling opioid addiction, there are different options to get help. One of the easiest ways is to call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789.
You can also find more resources on newschannel5.com. And right now, the conversation continues on News Channel 5 Plus and our Facebook page. Join us with your questions and comments.
And thank you for watching our special presentation tonight, Hooked, Tennessee's Opioid Crisis.